Sometimes it's necessary to right a wrong. And WVU football and head coach Neil Brown are finally righting a wrong that should have been righted and corrected years ago. This is a WVU football edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, coming at you from up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. This broadcast is brought to you by WVSportsNow.com, our newest venture within the Now family of networks. And this one's kind of personal to me. Try not to make it personal in a pro career, but this one's kind of personal. I am a WVU alum, as everybody knows, and I was a student at WVU at West Virginia University while Pat McAfee was there. And I was there in 2007 during the gut-wrenching loss to Pitt, which took West Virginia out of the national title picture, a picture that probably would have finished in a national championship if it wasn't for that loss. They were 28.5-point favorites. They would have been the second best team ranked in the country. That would have put them in the national championship game, and they probably would have won it based on how things shook out that year, based on how great that team was with Pat McAfee and Pat White and Steve Slayton and company. We all know afterwards Rich Rodriguez leaving and drama and controversy, shredding recruiting papers, and how that all went down. But 13-9 is the final score. And that's a final score that's going to live in infamy with West Virginia forever. And as Pat McAfee touched on it on his podcast, as he's doing his thing in media now, Thursday Night Football, etc., after his NFL career finished, had a solid pro career, punted in a Super Bowl, kicked off in a Super Bowl, was a place kicker at WVU. Didn't do that in the NFL, but had a successful pro career, to say the least, and now doing his thing in media. We're the same age. I'm the same age as Pat McAfee. I had a class with him at that time, and I know how, despite how awful that team played, and they should have won it going away, no matter what, so no excuses. It's certainly not all on him. If he would have made those two kicks, as he said in the recent podcast where this was touched on, they would have won nonetheless. And really just getting a win, no matter what happened, just getting a win. It wouldn't have been impressive, but just getting a win would have put them in the national title game, and that right there would have been a big deal, but they probably would have won, and winning that would have certainly been a major historic deal for that program. And Pat McAfee also touched on that, like Alabama, like Oklahoma, West Virginia University is the college of the state. Yeah, there's other ones, but it is the major university in the state. The athletic programs are the major team in the state in their respective sports. And yes, a lot of West Virginians root for the Steelers. We have a lot of them subscribing to this channel, so welcome. Got a lot of views on these WVU shows that are coming from somewhere. A lot of West Virginians are fans of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Pittsburgh sports teams, maybe for the southern part, maybe Cincinnati or wherever. I know a lot that just pick randomly, but a lot of them are Pittsburgh sports fans. And I get all that, and Pat McAfee gets all that, but like Alabama, like Oklahoma, etc., there's no other pro sports teams in those states. And yes, Oklahoma connects with the Cowboys, like Morgantown connects with, and West Virginia connects with the Steelers, but those Steeler fans, West Virginian Steeler fans, are probably number one West Virginia University fans, even above the Steelers. That probably is not the case for Pitt and the Steelers. They're probably Steelers number one based on the history, but regardless, it's also the winningest program in D1 football history, however you want to slice it, having not won a national championship. So without a national championship, West Virginia is the winningest D1 football program without a national championship, for whatever that means to you. That's, I guess, a positive in a way. You want to have a lot of wins, but you want to do it with some rings, and there's rings, but not a national championship level, and it's the winningest program without a national championship. And I can go on, and this is Pittsburgh Sports Live, so we got a lot of Pitt fan subscribers here, of course. Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership, they're covering Pitt. And I get it that Pitt, there's more successful history in terms of championships, for sure. They claim 9. They really only won 1, and I could do a whole show on this. They have the 1976 national title with Tony Dorsett. It's one of the greatest college football teams of all time, for sure. And for a sports trivia question for you guys out there, Tony Dorsett is the guy that has the honor of winning a national championship and also winning a Super Bowl as he did with the Cowboys his rookie year in the NFL in the same calendar year. So that's a trivia question out there for you, for any of you guys who do trivia at bars. And I'm a multiple-time trivia bar champion. But they claim 9. They didn't really win the other 8, guys. Come on, I could do a whole show on this. I can argue to the death if I need to. They lost the last game in some of those seasons. They lost multiple games in some of those seasons. There are several teams that were undefeated in some of those seasons that aren't Pitt. Several teams could claim and have claimed national titles for the same season. It's just crazy. Those other 8 aren't really there, even though they hang it on over top of the locker room. They hang some trophies and banners. I see them all the time covering the Steelers at Heinz Field, but really, they have 1. So it's a long program history like WVU where there's 1, but 1's better than 0 for sure. And I get there's more NFL Hall of Famers, so it's been a richer history. But WVU's been mightily successful too. There's been successful periods, despite not having won a national championship, the winningest program without one, and how gut-wrenching that 2007 loss was, because what it could have meant, and it's been connected with Pat McAfee. But it's not just an attack at Pitt by any means. I keep it real here. I would say that Alabama's claimed national titles that didn't really exist. Same thing with Notre Dame and other programs. Oklahoma too. I mean, those other 8, come on. Maybe I could give you 1 or 2 more, but not the 9 total. I mean, Pitt didn't even claim those championships or celebrate those championships or have anybody recognize those championships when they were won. So 1936, for example, one of them that's claimed in those 8, they didn't celebrate then. There was no parade. Nobody said anything. It was not a national championship season that year. In fact, that year, as well as the other 8, weren't recognized or celebrated. There was no trophies. There was no banners. There was nothing. There was no signs over a locker room until the mid-'70s. They did it for recruiting, as well as those other schools. But it was a different time, so regardless. Pitt has been the upset school in the last 10, 15 years. They haven't had great success on the field in terms of winning. It's been a roller coaster ride. But there's been upsets. There's been major upsets over Miami, over Clemson. Of course, the all-time upset over WVU. Even recently, over UCF. And that's what they're hanging their hat on. And that upset they can hang their hat on because, again, Pat McAfee missed those kicks. As bad as they played, if he would have made those 2 kicks, it might have been a different story. He knows it. He said it on the show. But none of that leads to him being deserving of the venom he received. He was receiving death threats. And I know a lot of this from when I was a student there. I had class with him at the time. He was very jovial prior to that game. Kind of this class clown in a way. Always having fun, telling jokes. He was friendly with everybody, really. After that, he was very quiet. He was very somber. He didn't go, actually, for a while after that. There was rumors he was in therapy. He was in counseling. He might actually have been scared to walk the street. Never would have figured that for him. I mean, he was a pretty big dude, especially for his position, but, bigger than myself and most colleagues there. Wasn't afraid to throw down if need be, but he was afraid to walk the streets. Then apparently his parents in Plum here in Western Pennsylvania received death threats, received, let's just call them paper bags, burning on their front door. I believe they had their mailbox destroyed. They had their car broken into, was a rumor I heard. They were threatened. His family was threatened. Makes sense why he might not love the program, might not love those fans, because that all went on because of those 2 kicks. He's the winningest kicker in program history. Don't forget that. He did a lot of good for that program and still does good for the program in terms of his NFL career that was successful, punting in a Super Bowl, kicking off in a Super Bowl, but also now in Thursday Night Football. He's recognizing the school still overall, still respects the school, but wasn't welcomed back by Dana Holgorsen, wasn't welcomed back by Bill Stewart after Rich Rodriguez left. And now is being welcomed back by Neil Brown. As he should. As he should. It's the greatest thing Neil Brown's done so far. It's been a roller coaster ride of a season. I talked about this on past shows on WVSportsNow.com as well as throughout the channel here. That you're going to have some growing pains. It's a new coach. A lot of the stars are gone. It's a young team. You're going to have the bumps in the road. But he's at least bringing back the culture and doing it right off the field. So this is the best thing he's done so far. Because connecting to the most successful men to ever be there, the successful period that was before him. Arguably the best period in program history, despite the 88 national championship appearance with Major Harris and Don Nalen. Despite going way back, and Pitt claimed those 8 national titles besides the 76 one years and decades after winning them. But WVU had an undefeated season in 1922. Now, I'm not bragging about it. It's 1922. My grandfather, who's still alive and kicking in 96, wasn't even alive then. That was the year before he was freaking born. But in 1922, before Babe Ruth got to the Yankees, to tell you, or Babe Ruth won a World Series with the Yankees. He got to the Yankees, obviously. But you know what I mean. That's how far back. Okay. And they were undefeated. So based on the rubric of those schools claiming national titles despite losing games, despite not really winning, despite not recognizing at the time, WVU should have claimed that as an undefeated season, as that as the national title year, but they didn't. But anyway, you could go to that year. You can go to 88. You can go to the Major Bowl win, the Orange Bowl win under Holgorsen, end of Big East, go into the Big 12, that era. But I would say the greatest coach in program history is Rich Rodriguez, as much as you maybe want to hear it, West Virginia fans. And the greatest success for the program is the Rich Rod, Pat White era, and during when I was a student. And it was unfortunately capped off with those two kicks being missed. Or we're not capped off, but that's the highlight, unfortunately, despite how down that is and how much success that there was, and the BCS wins and the Major Bowl wins, the Georgia Sugar Bowl, all of that, Fiesta Bowl wins. But that's kind of what's remembered, unfortunately. None of it was right. None of those death threats, all that stuff's ridiculous and buffoonery and idiocy from fans who take things way too damn seriously, even knowing that it is the team of the state and knowing that program's history. But still, all that's ridiculous. But that's all water under the bridge in terms of it's years ago, and he kind of even has tried to get behind that. But even Holgorsen a couple years ago, you could have welcomed Pat McAfee back before, and it should have happened already. But welcoming him back now is the right thing to do, and it also could help the program to the future. It could do many, many things in terms of he's a cool guy that's gained a lot of swag and cool factor on Thursday Night Football. His time at Barstool Sports, funny he is with his podcast and on social media, just his tweets alone. So a high school kid may see him, like him, find him funny, think he's cool. If they see him at the facility, if they see him at practice, if they see him on a visit, that'll help them maybe decide to go to WVU. He's part of the fabric of the program. He's part of the success portion of that program. He's the leading scorer. He's one of the most successful athletes in that program history. And yes, there's been championships. Yes, there's even been national titles in other programs at that school. Yes, there's been Jerry West, the logo, basketball-wise. And there's been a recent Final Four, and there's been Bob Huggins, etc. We know the soccer team. We know the rifle team. But Pat McAfee, the leading scorer in football history, and that means something. And you should have welcomed him back years ago, but it's great that he is there now. He'll help recruiting in the future, and it's the greatest thing Neil Brown's done so far. And that's not to say the slight about on the field. There'll be time for that. But early on in this tenure, the first quarter, he's doing it right off the field at least, and that's the number one, to build that culture back to being a winning culture, a successful program-like culture. And to do that, you bring back the greats like Pat McAfee, who had said that he didn't feel comfortable being back there because of all the hate. And that's just insane. That's just ridiculous. And you can read it here. And Neil Brown, in his recent press conference, he made it clear he's welcome back anytime, went into it, how wrong it was and how he was treated, etc. So Neil Brown doing it right there by Pat McAfee. And as a WVU alum, I'll say I appreciate that, because that is the right thing and it should have already happened. That's going to do it here for this one. Kind of got personal with it. Kind of just wanted to touch on that, not as much the games and the analysis, because yes, it's been a roller coaster ride, and yes, I said temper expectations, and yes, I said I'm going to keep it real, and WVU who's I thought they were, even after the big win over NC State. So they got a win over Kansas. The conference win. It wasn't exactly impressive either. There was bumps in the road there. They got the running game moving, but I'll get all of that later into future weeks. I just wanted to get this out. This is going to be, the program here for WVSportsNow.com for this week, but I wanted to touch on it. This was personal to me because I was a student then. I went through it as a fan then before getting professional into media, and I knew Pat McAfee a little bit. I tried to have him on my college radio show a bunch, but he never showed up for me. But anyway, There's a lot of stories like people have like that about him then. But he was a good guy, mostly nice to me. And he didn't deserve the hate and venom that he received. In fact, he did a lot of good for the program and still is. So, Pat McAfee, welcome back. It should have already happened, but it will actually help the future of the program. It will. Make sure to follow up and hit up the family of networks: Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, SteelersNow.com, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, etc. PGHSportsLive.com, where Pittsburgh Sports Live, kind of as a channel, lives in website form. Make sure to subscribe. Click subscribe. Click on the subscribe button. Make it easier for us to get this content, all of our golden quality content here through the channel, whether it be player interviews, press conferences, whether it be in-game content, whether it be these shows, mine or others. Pittsburgh Sports Live again on the channel. And a wrong was righted, finally. As Pat McAfee, as you see him there in the picture on WVSportsNow.com there. I believe that's from the Sporting News, to give it its proper due. Pat McAfee there in front of the American flag. There's not many that are more America, that are representing more of America and more of the American dream than Pat McAfee. So it's great to have him back in the fold. It's the right thing. It should have already happened, and I almost can't imagine any WVU fans at this point that would not agree. But who knows? Stranger things have happened.